everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Erin and today we are doing my first ever unhaul. For a long time in my life, I was collecting any book I could get my hands on. I didn't get rid of any books even if I didn't like them because I wanted to have a full library and I felt like every book deserves a space on a shelf. Which is true, but I'm realizing now it doesn't have to be my shelf. If I don't like a book, there's no point in keeping it. I'm also sometimes keep books because I want someone else to be able to read it in the future. And I realized that if I wouldn't recommend the book to somebody, I don't necessarily have to keep it. So I have 41 books to unhaul today, I believe. Most of them are going to be donated. There are a few that I'm getting rid of just because they're in pretty poor condition. So I'm not sure if I'll donate those. But let's go ahead and get started. These are in no particular order, and I'm going to run through them pretty quick. Probably not talk about them much. So the first book I have is Last Seen Leaving. I don't know where the cover for this is because it did have a very beautiful cover. This is the story of a girl that goes missing and it follows her boyfriend trying to figure out what happened. And I just didn't like the ending. I didn't like the girl that was missing and why she went missing, and just kind of as things got solved, I realized I was not a fan. So I think it was a 2-star for me. And I almost kept it because of the cover, but can't find the cover. So I also have The Best of John Belaris. This is a collection of like his first 3 short stories. And the first one is actually The House with a Clock in Its Walls, which eventually became a movie. And it was a decent kids book, but I feel like there are others that are better. And I did not like how they talked about the main character and his weight. I think the plots were stretched out. There actually wasn't that much ever happening. And so, yeah, I just feel like there are better kids' books. True Tales from the Life of a New York City Cop. This is a memoir written by Steve Osborne. It was decent. There were some good stories in there, but I think the editing could have been a lot better. Things got very repetitive, and I'm never going to reread it. Next, I have a book I recently read, and that is Beware of the Purple Peanut Butter. I love this book. I'm probably going to try and find another copy, but this one, as you can see, is like duct taped. It is falling apart pretty badly, and it just needs to go. A similar book is Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. This is a good book and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't love it. It was probably like a 3-star for me. I wouldn't mind owning it again, but as you can see, this book, no cover, the back is all ripped up. So it's past its time. Let's see, another book without a cover. Kind of bad about that. This book is The Game of Love and Death. I was really excited about this book. It is told from the perspectives of love and death at first, and they always take bets about relationships between humans, and death always wins. It's supposed to be kind of a Romeo and Juliet kind of love story, and I was very excited. It's an interracial couple when that was not an okay thing, and so I thought it could be a really interesting story, but at the end of the day, I just did not buy into their relationship or either of their characters, really. I think if it had gone more in depth, I would have loved it, but it just barely scratched the surface of most of the topics addressed in it, and because of that, it just didn't do it for me. Next, I have another one with a beautiful cover, and that is Timber Creek Station by Allie Lewis. I love this cover, and I wish the book had been good. This is like a coming-of-age story about this kid in Australia, and he's trying to get over the death of his brother. But the thing is, there's like no growth in that character. There's no plot. It's just almost like a kid's diary of mundane work on a farm. And it didn't go anywhere. Like by the end of the book, I felt like I had just followed some random person's life for a few days and nothing had happened. Super disappointing. I don't even know if it could be considered a coming of age because there was no character development. But anyway, That's one. I also talked about this book recently in my wrap-up. It's Remember Me by Treza Azzopardi. The writing style did not fit me. The timeline and pacing was pretty confusing to me, and the plot did not make up for it, and neither did the characters. So, yeah, not a book for me. This book I just kind of outgrew. That's I Didn't Come Here to Make Friends by Courtney Robertson. I love The Bachelor and Bachelorette. It is a guilty pleasure of mine. Actually, not even guilty pleasure. Like, I don't feel bad about loving this show. But I got this book because I wanted to just kind of know more about the franchise, and it seemed like an interesting read, and it was. I mean, at the time when I read it, I really enjoyed it, but I don't think I still need it on my shelf. I don't think anybody else would want to read it, and so I think it's time to get rid of it. The next book was Swamplandia by Karen Russell. This was a pretty popular book for a little bit. I read it with my friend's book club, and I just found it more weird and creepy than good. It follows a family that lives on a swamp, and their dad kind of abandons them, and then people go missing, and all three kids kind of go off and do their own thing, and there's just a little bit of maybe magical realism, but also maybe not. And yeah, I don't think it was bad, but I did not enjoy it enough to keep it. I'm also getting rid of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The only reason I'm getting rid of this edition is because it is like the kids' abridged edition, and I didn't realize that when I bought it. I'd rather have the original edition so that when I read it, I get the full story. I also have What Light by Jay Asher. I was really disappointed in this book. I love Jay Asher's 13 Reasons Why, and so I had high expectations for this, and it fell so short. So short. It's a contemporary romance, and the romance itself was almost insta-love, which is not a thing I like. There were a lot of issues that didn't seem to really be issues. Things that could have easily been solved. It was almost like those teens, like, everything is the end of the world, and it really isn't. So, yeah, and even their relationship, the way it progressed was all out of order. I think they said I love you before they had their first kiss, and she was talking about never leaving him after like a month of knowing him. Just not my style of romance. This next one was another one that I was very disappointed in because I've heard a lot of good things about the author. The Beginning Place by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the only book I've read by this author. She's well known as being a solid writer, and so I guess maybe I just went in expecting too much. I don't know how this work compares to her other work. I still plan on reading as much of her work as I can. This just was not a good place to start. I think maybe because it's a middle grade, and it wasn't a bad story. It was just very mediocre, and I didn't really invest in any of it, and it felt like it should have been a trilogy instead of a standalone with only, 200 pages? There needed to be more all around in everything. The next one I have is a series. I've only read the first one, and that is Stormbreaker by Anthony Horowitz. This my brother gave to me when he kind of grew out of it, and I just had it on my shelves in case I wanted to put it in my classroom. And I finally read the first one and realized that I don't want my kids reading these books because it's just not a good book. So I have like the first 4, and I'm getting rid of all of them. I think the writing style was very poor. The plot was poor. Yeah, I don't know. There were a lot of things that didn't make sense, and I feel like just because it's a kid book doesn't mean you can have a bunch of plot holes. Just not a good example of a quality story. Fearless by Francine Pascal. It's about a girl who, for some reason, I can't remember if it's like a genetic thing or she was genetically modified or something like that, but she doesn't feel fear. And so it's kind of her story going and finding bad people because she's not afraid to put them in their place. and her story kind of trying to figure out why she is the way she is, also her going through high school. There's a little bit of a romance, which is actually why I bought the second one, because I wanted to see where the romance was going to go, and then it just really never came to anything by the end of the second book, and I was tired of waiting for it to come to something. I don't think this is a bad book. I don't really remember it, though. It's pretty uneventful in my mind, considering how beefy both the first and the second book are. I just don't remember what happened. The next two books I just accidentally have multiple copies of. So one of them is The Magician by Michael Scott. This is one of his series. I think it's the third book or second book, and I forgot that I had already owned it. I also have like 5 copies of Charlotte's Web. A few are in my classroom, one on my shelf, and so I didn't need another one on my shelf. Someone else gets to enjoy it now. My Dirty Little Book of Stolen Time. This is a time-traveling romance by Liz Jensen. I got it at a thrift store, and it was an okay read, but it doesn't stick out in my mind. I think the time that it was written in just kind of felt off to me, and it wasn't anything I was super invested in, so I'll let someone else have a go at it. I also have the Ruined trilogy by Simone Elkeles. I love this author's other works, but this one for me just didn't do it. It's all 3 books in one, and I read them all, and they were enjoyable but not stand out, especially compared to her other ones. Defiance by C.J. Redwine. This is a fantasy book, and honestly, I don't remember the plot. I think just overall, as far as fantasy, it was so underwhelming that I didn't feel the need to keep it. I knew I wasn't going to read the rest of the books in this series. I don't think it's a bad series. I think I just have others I prefer more. This next one, I think I'm more hurt by than some of the others. As a Kansan, we get a lot of remarks regarding The Wizard of Oz, and I have a very love-hate relationship with The Wizard of Oz. I love the story, but I feel like a lot of people just only know that about Kansas, and so anytime I tell someone I'm from Kansas for the first time, immediately I get a comment about The Wizard of Oz. But I thought I'd read Dorothy Must Die by Daniel Page, and I hated it. This is one of my least favorite reads on my shelf, and I immediately knew I was not going to continue. I don't remember why I hated it. It just hurt. I have Incarceron. I read this recently, and it was another one of those okay books where I don't think I'm going to finish the series, so I'd rather have room for other books. This next one was very popular when like Hunger Games and Maze Runner were going around, and that is Matched by Ali Condal. I remember loving this book, and then I read the second one, and it was so bad that I never read the third. I went back to try and reread this because I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep it or not, and I didn't really get very far into it and realized that I have either outgrown it or it was never that good in the first place. I don't know. I have another series, and that is The Uprising and The Forsaken by Lisa Strauss. These were another one of those fantasies that were okay, but as far as fantasies go, they just didn't stand out. There's a girl who takes a test, and supposedly she fails the test and is kind of sent to this island where kids are kind of abandoned, and so there's different tribes of kids. They're trying to figure out what's going on, all that kind of stuff. And this was actually a pretty decent beginning, but by the end of the second one, it felt like it was trying to be a good fantasy and just not quite reaching that level. Next I have The Impossible by Nancy Werland. This is another romance. There's a curse on the family. With the birth of their first child, they'll go crazy if they don't complete 3 impossible tasks. Again, I think just not a standout. I had to reread the back because I actually forgot what this was about, and so that in and of itself tells me that I probably don't need it on my shelf. This is The Living. It was like supposed to be a zombie survival book, and honestly, I could not tell you anything more about it aside from I think the kids start out on an abandoned like boat, maybe. I don't remember anything except for I remember having the feeling of meh when I finished it. I also have The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I talked about this in one of my wrap-ups. This just felt like a very buzzwordy nothing. It could help some people maybe, but I think there is so much just fluff and filler to get through that by the time you found the good points that could be helpful, they're way better self-help books. That same month, I also read The Confession by John Grisham. The pacing of this book really bothered me. The way that race was portrayed really bothered me. Then I have If I Were in Charge of the World. This is a poem collection. The book is a little beat up and the poems weren't that memorable, I feel like. Like, I'd rather have Dr. Seuss and Shel Silverstein on my shelf, so this one is getting donated as well. Next up is The Boyfriend app by Katie Seiss, an old contemporary romance that I've had for a while, and it's a pretty classic, like, nerdy girl makes an app that pairs her with, like, the most popular boy. Romance ensues. I think overall it was just another one of those didn't stand out kind of books that I probably won't ever reread. We have International Spy Museum Handbook of Practical Spy. I got this book on an 8th grade field trip to the FBI building in like DC, and I wanted to be a spy, and so I got this book, and I finally read it about 6 months ago and realized this has very little actual advice, and any advice in here is pretty common sense. Yeah, that was pretty disappointing. Maybe as a kid, if I had actually read it when I bought it, it could have been worth something, but I'll let somebody else who enjoys spying pick this up. Then we have The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This book I read and was confused, and it's another fantasy where like aliens come, and by the end I just was not sure what was happening. I remember just being very confused and did not enjoy it enough to try and figure out. Then I have a Chuck Palahniuk book rant. Chuck Palahniuk wrote Fight Club, which is a good book. This one, however, didn't click with me, and I've read a few of his other works, and I think his writing overall is just a little bit too bizarre for me to really enjoy. The next one I have is The Feelings book. This is an American Girl book that I got when I was like a preteen. I don't think I'm going to need it anymore, so I'll let someone else who may need it now. 3 more. This next one is 34 Pieces of You by Carmen Rodriguez. I think in this book someone dies and they leave messages or little notes for like 3 of their friends, and that all comes together. There's been other books I've read that kind of have similar themes, and this one just wasn't the best of those. And I don't think I'll ever reread it, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because it felt pretty uneventful by the end of it. I also have Shadowfell by Juliet Mariller. So this is, again, a fantasy that just in my mind got so muddled with all the other fantasies, it didn't stand out to me in any way. I cannot even tell you the plot aside from there is a girl going on a journey. I don't remember anything else. I don't remember there being anything that stood out to me. I don't think it was probably a bad book, but maybe someone else will enjoy it more. Finally, I have A Whole New World. This is by Liz Brashwell. This was supposed to be a retelling of Aladdin, where Jasmine is actually like the street urchin. I think I was hoping it would be more similar to the actual story, and the story they gave just didn't really sell me on either character. And I don't know how you can write the story and I not fall in love with the characters, but somehow that happened. Alright guys, I have 41 books to donate. So, thanks for watching. Let me know if you think any of these books deserve a second chance. I don't think there are any that I was really considering or like wavering on. Or if you have any recommendations based on these that you think I would like more, especially with like Ursula K. Le Guin. This was just not a good starting point, so if you have a different recommendation, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, have a good day, and I'll see you later. Bye!